The door didn't slam. It didn't creak. It barely made a sound at all. Yet somehow, that quiet exit echoed louder than anything else in the entire building. Because when Arman Qureshi walked out of that glass-walled office after being fired, he carried something heavier than a cardboard box of belongings. He carried the kind of silence that comes from having nothing left to say, and everything left to lose. Before we go deeper into this story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The city outside was bright, flooded with sharp daylight that reflected off towering buildings and polished cars. Inside the corporate headquarters of Virex Solutions, however, the air had shifted. Moments earlier, voices had been raised, accusations thrown, and judgments made too quickly. Arman had stood there in his faded gray maintenance uniform, hands steady but eyes tired, listening as executives spoke about liability, standards, and company image. Words that felt clean and professional, but cut deep. Arman wasn't always a maintenance worker. Years ago, he had dreams that stretched beyond fixing broken pipes and repairing flickering lights. But life had a way of narrowing his world. After his wife passed away unexpectedly, everything changed. Suddenly, he wasn't just a man with ambitions, he was a father, a provider, and the only anchor for his 6-year-old daughter, Meher. She had soft curls, wide curious eyes, and a habit of waiting by the door every evening, clutching her small stuffed rabbit until he returned home. That job at Virex Solutions wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough. It gave him stability, routine, and most importantly, time. Time to walk Meher to school, time to pack her lunch, time to read her stories at night even when exhaustion pressed heavily on his shoulders. The incident that cost him his job seemed small on the surface. A high-profile meeting had been disrupted when the conference room's automated system failed. Lights flickered, the presentation screen glitched, and the CEO, Saad Rahmani, had been embarrassed in front of international investors. Fingers pointed quickly, and somehow they all landed on Arman. Maintenance oversight. Negligence. Carelessness. He hadn't argued. Not because he didn't have the truth, but because he had learned something about the world. It rarely pauses to hear quiet voices. So he nodded once, accepted the termination, and walked out. What no one noticed in that moment, not the executives, not the assistants, not even the CEO, was the small black dome fixed discreetly in the corner of the conference room ceiling. A hidden security camera, silently recording everything. Arman stepped out into the daylight, blinking against the brightness. He didn't check his phone, didn't call anyone. He simply walked. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of pride, but because of Meher. How do you explain to a child that stability can vanish in a single morning? That the world can change before lunch? Back inside, the building returned to its usual rhythm. Meetings resumed. Emails were sent. Coffee machines hummed. But something lingered, an unease, subtle yet persistent. Late that afternoon, the head of security reviewed routine footage. It was standard protocol after any internal disruption. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Executives entering, assistants setting up, Arman checking systems earlier that morning. But then, something caught his attention. He rewound. There, just before the meeting began, a junior executive had entered the room alone. Nervous energy. Quick glances. The man approached the control panel, fiddled with something, and then stepped away. Minutes later, the system failed. The footage was clear. Undeniable. Within an hour, the video reached Saad Rahmani. He watched it once. Then again. And again. Each time, the same realization settled deeper into his chest. The mistake. The assumption. The quiet man who didn't defend himself. The man who simply walked away. Saad leaned back in his chair, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on him. He had built his reputation on decisiveness, efficiency, and control. But in that moment, he felt something unfamiliar: regret. Because this wasn't just about a wrongful termination. It was about a man's dignity. A father's livelihood. Meanwhile, across the city, Arman sat on a worn bench outside Meher's school. Children poured out through the gates, laughter filling the air. He forced a smile as she ran toward him, her small arms wrapping tightly around his waist. He didn't tell her. Not yet. They walked home together under the bright afternoon sun. Meher talked about her day, about a drawing she made, about a friend who shared her lunch. Arman listened, nodding, holding on to every word like it was something fragile and precious. That evening, their small apartment felt quieter than usual. Arman cooked a simple meal, moving through familiar motions, his mind elsewhere. Bills. Rent. Uncertainty. It all loomed ahead like an approaching storm. But when Meher laughed at something silly, when she tugged his sleeve to show him her drawing, something shifted inside him. A reminder. A reason. Back at Virex Solutions, Saad didn't sleep that night. He kept seeing the footage. The way Arman had calmly checked the systems earlier, the way he had been blamed without hesitation, the way he had walked out, silent, composed, but carrying something invisible. By morning, Saad had made a decision. Not just to correct a mistake, but to do something more difficult, to face it. The next day, a sleek black car stopped outside Arman's modest building. Neighbors peeked through curtains as a sharply dressed man stepped out. It wasn't every day someone like Saad Rahmani showed up in a place like this. Arman opened the door cautiously, confusion flickering across his face. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Saad handed him a tablet. The footage played. Arman watched quietly. No surprise. No anger. Just a slow, steady understanding. What surprised Saad most was not outrage, but restraint. Because Arman didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't demand anything. He simply looked at the screen, then at Saad, and nodded once. That silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of something deeper: integrity. Saad felt it. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. Leadership, he realized, wasn't just about making decisions. It was about owning them. Correcting them. Learning from them. He offered Arman his job back. Not just reinstated, but promoted. A role with better pay, better hours, more stability. Arman hesitated. Not because he didn't need it, but because trust, once shaken, doesn't rebuild instantly. But then Meher peeked from behind the door, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with curiosity. And Arman made his decision. Not for himself. For her. Days later, Arman walked back into Virex Solutions. But this time, something was different. The same halls, the same people, but a different presence. Word had spread. Not just about the mistake, but about how it was handled afterward. Respect, once missing, had quietly taken its place. Saad watched from his office as Arman moved through the building, not as an invisible worker, but as someone seen. And that hidden camera footage? It became more than evidence. It became a reminder. A lesson embedded into the company's culture, that every person matters, that silence should never be mistaken for guilt, and that sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who walk away without a fight. As the weeks passed, Arman's life began to stabilize again. Mornings with Meher felt lighter. Evenings carried less worry. And slowly, something returned to him that he thought he had lost: hope. But the story didn't end there. Because stories like this don't end with a job. They end with something deeper. With growth. With change. With the quiet realization that kindness, even delayed, still matters. If this story touched your heart, take a moment right now, like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that good still exists, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House for more stories that stay with you long after they end. And before we close, here's something special. Comment down below with one word, respect, if you believe every person deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. Because sometimes, the loudest impact in life comes from the quietest moments.